How to use Essential Graphics. Now that we know how Essential Graphics work, we can start looking at creating our own assets using this tool. We'll start by creating the layers for our asset. For this example, I'll be using this position marker design to show all the ways we can implement Essential Graphics. Almost every parameter that a layer has or that has been added through effects can be used as an essential property. Even if we add them to an adjustment layer, those parameters can still be used as essential properties. So far, the only ones that don't seem to be supported as parameters are the ones related to paths like masks and shape paths. Back on our animated marker, we need to decide which parameters will be useful to use as essential properties. In this case, and thinking this icon can be used in different projects just by slightly changing the fill and stroke colors, as well as the stroke weight, and possibly even the size of the icon. Let's start with those. Adding parameters to be used as essential graphics is quite easy. We just need to right-click over the parameter we want to use. I'll start with the fill color, and on the menu I'll select Add Property to Essential Graphics. Once we do this, a new panel will show on our interface for Essential Graphics. This panel lets us manage the different parameters that will become essential properties once we drag and drop our comp into a new timeline. We can change the names of how the properties will show. Let's talk a bit about the options available on this panel. At the top right, we have the Name field. This is the name that will be given to the essential graphics if we export them as a template with the button at the bottom. The second file is a drop-down menu. Here you'll find a list with all the comps in our project, and if we select one, this will show the essential properties added to that comp. We'll touch on this more at a later time, as it's not very intuitive as to how After Effects adds the properties to this panel from our layers. The button Solo Supported Properties will unfold all our layers so that they show all the properties that can be used as essential properties. This will include the properties of effects if they've been applied to the layer. The Set Poster Time button will update the image reference on the top right corner with a snapshot of the full comp at the current time selected in the timeline. Since all essential properties added to this panel will show together in the same comp once we add it to a timeline, we need to be careful how we name things so that they are easy to distinguish. We can rename the essential properties added to the panel by clicking on them. Next to each property name, you'll see the default values that After Effects will use when you import the comp into a new timeline. This means that if you change any value in this panel, your main values will be updated, making them the ones that will be used from now on. At the bottom of the panel, we have an Add Formatting button that gives us two options. The first one is for adding comments. These comments are only visible on this panel and are useful when we need to leave a message to another designer that might use these assets. The second option is Add Group. This is quite useful as it allows us to show parameters grouped in foldable and unfoldable rows, and will become very helpful when adding essential properties for multiple layers in order to find them in our main composition. Now that we have a better understanding of this panel, let's add other parameters that I want for my essential properties. For stroke color, stroke weight, and size. Remember, you can search for specific parameters by selecting one or more layers and typing the parameter name into the search box, or by pressing Command, Control, and F to activate the search box. Now I'll add the same property parameters as layer 1 for our second layer. Then proceed to group and rename all my essential properties accordingly to make it easier to work with in the future. Now let's import our marker into a new timeline, and we'll check our essential parameters. As we can see, all of them are working correctly. And I'm sure some will wonder why make scale an essential parameter if we already have the scale of the layer. While that may be true, the problem is that if I change the normal scale and make my object smaller, the animation gets cut off from the top where the bounding box of the shape comp ends. However, if I scale the marker using the Scale Essential property for both the layers, we get the correct result. The same thing might apply if you're working with rotations, so keep that in mind. Now that we can see the essential properties, I'm sure you've noticed we have some new icons next to each of the parameters. These are used to pull and push values in and from our main object comp. The first option resets our current value to the default one by pulling from the primary comp and works like a reset button. The second option allows us to permanently make the original object parameters change to use these new values as the default ones. So if I make my scale smaller and then click on the Push Primary button, then my default value has been updated, as we can see if I go to the primary comp. Just remember that if you update any of the default values of the primary comp with this method, all the other assets that you've imported into other timelines will also be updated. So be careful when using this option.